So if you're using a DJI Osmo mobile gimbal, from the first version right up to the latest OM8P, the Mimo app adds essential functionality to the gimbal. In this video, I'm going to go through and explain absolutely every single feature contained within the DJI Mimo app. So I'm going to timestamp everything as well, so you can easily just navigate using the chapters and find the feature that you're interested in. The Mimo app works for both iPhone and Android devices, however not all features work at the same level. So I've already covered the AI trackers and connecting DJI mics, as well as ActiveTrack 8 in my other Osmo mobile tutorials, and they're going to be linked in the description below. So if you haven't watched those already, I do recommend that you watch them if you want a complete overview of the gimbal's features. So I'm also going to make a PDF of this whole video, so you can just download that if you need to reference anything quickly. For your gimbal to work with your smartphone, it does need to be connected via Bluetooth, so make sure that you have Bluetooth enabled. Best practice is to mount the smartphone to the gimbal before powering it on. So just power on the gimbal, and you can do that by opening it out, or you can long press the power button, open the DJI Mimo app, and it should automatically detect the gimbal. And the first time you connect to the gimbal, you're going to need to tap on the name of the gimbal to connect it. And every time after that, when you open the app, it will automatically connect to the gimbal, and then it will take you to the camera interface. So you can always switch back to the home page just by tapping the small house-shaped icon in the corner here. So the Mimo app homepage is really one of the things that DJI does really well in the Mimo app, because you can access many resources from the homepage, and it's all laid out really nice and clearly. And at the top you can see there's a bunch of DJI products on a carousel, so you can probably ignore that. And then below that is the list of DJI devices that you've activated using the Mimo app, so you can swipe to scroll through all your devices. So the Academy offers full courses, and if you tap that, you can switch to DJI's website where they have these short 5-minute lessons. Shooting Scene takes you to tutorials based on the activity. So things like vlogging, underwater, cycling, and so on. But they're not specific to your connected device. When you tap one, you're going to find that they are mixed in with the purchase links. Shot Guides is a library of scenario-based shooting tutorials. Tap a scenario tile like natural, city, seaside, park, food, stay at home, and so on, and then choose a subcategory like hiking or strolling through the forest or mountaineering. Each guide opens with a finished example video, and that's just to show you what you're aiming for. And then below that, you've got this shot list. And you've got here every individual shot that's needed to build the final edit. And each is going to have its own reference clip and a label like back view or people. So what you do is you watch each reference and then you go out and you capture your own version. So I'd say it's a really useful starting point if you're not sure what to film in a given situation, or if you want a ready-made shot list to work through rather than having to plan your own. If you tap the profile and log in, or if you don't have a login, you can create an account. You're going to find various support pages here, as well as some personal settings. At the top, you can again swipe through all your previously activated devices. And we've got a couple of links to DJI's service and a button for contacting DJI customer support. Sports training allows you to record GPS data, which can then be overlaid onto your video. And you can also actually connect your health data that your phone is recording, things like heart rate and so on, and you can add that to your overlay. Wireless mic is where you can connect your DJI mics to your phone via the app. Below that, we have DJI Forum, DJI Store, and also your order status updates. Tap Editor to go to the editing page, and you've got two main options here. New Project opens up the manual timeline editor. And so here you can just bring in clips into a proper timeline, and you can control everything yourself. You can trim the clips, split, so you can add speed ramps, transitions, filters, music, text, and audio levels. You can add motion blur here as well, as sort of like a fake motion blur that's added on using computational methods. So this is basically real editing, as if you were using, I don't know, iMovie or CapCut. One tap edit, on the other hand, takes you along the AI editing or template route. So then you pick a bunch of clips, the app analyzes them, matches them to a template with music, transitions and pacing, and then it edits it all together into a finished video for you. So it's quicker, but the results will probably be variable. Sometimes it might work, sometimes it might not. Below that, there are a whole bunch of templates and effects under various tabs and headings, which you can explore at your leisure. I'm not going to go through them all here because that would take a whole kind of hour-long video just to cover those. Tap Album here to bring up any DJI short videos that you have downloaded onto your phone. With it set to local here, the album is going to show just your DJI short videos. And these are actually shot with the Pocket 3. But if I switch to Recents, it now shows all the media on my iPhone, including photos and videos that I shot with the iPhone. To select items, tap the tick in a circle. Now tap the media that you want to select, and then you can either tap the heart button, which is going to favorite that media, or you can tap the trash button if you want to delete it. Okay, if you want to get shooting some video, tap the camera button to switch to camera mode. The gimbal always defaults to portrait mode when you first power up. And with the OM8P, you now need to use the dedicated touchscreen button to switch between landscape and portrait. With previous models from the OM5 onwards, you can use the physical switch button. You just press it twice to switch. So of course the big red circle is, you guessed it, the record button. And in video mode, tapping this is going to start recording, and in photo mode, it's going to take a photo. And of course, pressing the shutter button on the gimbal handle is going to have the same effect as tapping the circle on the screen. If you want a comprehensive understanding of your smartphone gimbal, my complete guide is now available on Amazon. To the right of the record button is what I call the shooting mode menu, which is not to be confused with the gimbal modes, because gimbal modes are like the pan follow, pan and tilt follow, and so on. So just swipe to access all these shooting modes. Video mode and photo mode are pretty self-explanatory. To zoom in and out, you can either use the control on the gimbal or tap the buttons in the app. If you tap and hold the button, you're going to get a slider control for zoom. And zoom basically works the same for video and photo. Cinematic lens is a mode that groups 5 creative effects in one place. So you've got auto spin shot, you've got slow shutter, you've got action shot, and you've got dolly zoom, which actually used to be called dyna zoom in the old version of the app, and you've got widescreen. So you can just tap the one that you want to select, and you'll get a description of what it does and a little video here to show you as well. And if you want to close this window, you can just tap away from it. And to open it again, you just tap the name of the effect, which is now in the middle of the screen. If you switch to slow motion, that means the video is going to be in slow motion when it's played back. To change speed or resolution, tap the frame rate and resolution button on the left. For some reason here it says resolution and magnification, and that's not actually correct because the 4 times and the 8 times actually refers to the frame rate, not the magnification. Because, 120 frames per second is 4 times the frame rate that it's going to play back at, which is 30 frames per second. So you will get different options depending on your device, and on my iPhone 17 Pro I can get 120 frames per second and 240 frames per second, but they're both limited to 1080p in this app, and you don't get 4K. So really, if I wanted to shoot slow motion, I'd actually be better off switching to the native app of my phone here, because there I can get 120 frames per second at 4K. Actually, with the latest firmware update for the OM8 and 8P, you can now control zoom as well as front rear camera switch in the native ISO camera app using the gimbal. To do this, just go to your iPhone, go to Settings, Accessibility, and toggle on Zoom. And now when you open your iPhone native camera, you can actually use the wheel on the gimbal or the joystick if you have the OM8P to control zoom in the native app. And you can also use the front to rear switch button on the gimbal as well. Timelapse shoots images at a very slow frame rate and then plays those frames back much faster. So time appears to be moving extremely fast. Once selected, timelapse controls appear at the top of the screen. The first setting is duration. And that is actually the setting for how long you want the camera to be shooting for. So this isn't how long the final time lapse will actually be. The second setting is how often you want the camera to shoot a frame, measured in seconds, so it's the interval between each frame. And you can choose from every half a second up to once per minute. So the higher this setting is, the faster your time lapse is gonna go. And finally, we've got the setting for the mode of the time lapse. So if we have it at fixed angle, that means the gimbal isn't gonna move during the time lapse. And the next two are left to right or right to left. And that means that the gimbal will simply pan for the duration of the time lapse. That's actually why you can't set an infinite duration when the gimbal is moving. And the final time-lapse mode is custom. So if you want the gimbal to move the camera during the time-lapse, then use this mode to program a path. So it's like the left to right or right to left, except you get to choose exactly the points that it moves between. And you can actually add up to 4 points that you want the camera to move to. So just use the joystick, move the gimbal to the starting point, tap the plus button, and then move the gimbal to the next point. Tap the plus button again. And now when you tap the record button, the gimbal is going to move between those 2 points that you've just set, or more points if you've added more. So it's a good idea to actually lock exposure and white balance before you start recording. And once everything is set, just press record and Mimo will begin capturing your time lapse. Hyperlapse is actually pretty similar to time-lapse. The difference is that a time-lapse is designed to be used with a stationary camera, while hyperlapse is for a moving camera. For example, a shot captured by walking along a street, where all the passers-by and cars whiz past you as you move along. Or you could mount it to a car or to your bike or something else and record a hyperlapse there as well. Tap the resolution and speed button, which is on the left. Again, DJI has called this magnification, which doesn't really make any sense to me, unless I'm behind the times and that's what they're calling it now. But really, this is just how much you speed up time. I can't see how that's magnified. It's not magnifying time, is it? Anyway, nothing to do with zoom. It's how much you speed up time. So the bigger the number, the faster it's going to go. Resolution options on my iPhone 17 Pro are 4K. 1080p and 720p. The higher the resolution, the bigger the file, but personally I'd just choose 4K here unless I have to save space for some reason. So like I say, magnification is actually the playback speed. If you choose 15 times, for example, the final video is going to play back 15 times faster than the real time. That means if you shoot for 1 minute, you're going to get 4 seconds of video. And you can choose here 5 times, 10 times, 15 times, 30 times, or you can actually just choose auto. If you choose the lower numbers, you're going to get a slower, more watchable hyperlapse. And if you choose a higher number, you're going to cover more distance, but in less time. And it can feel a little bit frantic. It's up to you though. It just depends on the style you're going for, really. Now, if you choose auto, it basically works like the iPhone's native time lapse. And that means that the longer that you shoot, the more it compresses. So the final video is always going to be a kind of similar length, regardless of how long you shoot for. Pano is short for panorama, and it's going to give you 3 different options for taking a panoramic photo. Once selected, a Pano selector button becomes available on the left of the screen. The 3x3 Pano option shoots 9 photos to cover a wider field of view, and then it's going to edit them all together. And what you end up with is like using a wide angle or fisheye lens. The second option takes 7 photos from left to right. So you're going to get a very wide view, but it's not going to look up or down. The final result is a very wide 240-degree field of view. The third option is Mimo's Clone Me feature. And this takes 3 photos from left to right, but this time 1 or more subjects should be in the frame. And then each time they need to move for each photo, and you've got to be in the middle of the frame somewhere so that in the final image, the subject has been cloned, and you'll see, if you do it for yourself, you'll see yourself 3 times in the same photo. And of course, it makes sense to do a different pose each time. Tap the settings button in the corner, which is basically 4 circles in a square, and then tap more settings. Now tap the general tab. And if you scroll down, you're going to see a toggle switch for show more modes. And this will actually add story, shot guides, and parent and kids mode to the shooting modes bar. Tap the 2 arrows in a circle, which is a button which will switch between front and rear cameras. And you can also do this with a button on the gimbal. Using my iPhone 17 Pro, I was able to access up to 60 frames per second at 4K resolution in the selfie camera. But if you do want to use Glamour Effects, 30 frames per second is the max frame rate setting. And the other thing is that you're not able to use Glamour Effects with Active Track at 4K. You have to switch down to 1080p. The button to the side of the album button allows you to access 3 settings that are to do with Active Track. So you can switch gesture control to follow and shoot or just shoot. And you can either hold up your open palm or a V sign. And both of these gestures will start and stop the camera and the gimbal. Follow and shoot just means the camera will start recording and it will try to track and follow your movements. Shoot only is just basically a start and stop recording or take a photo, and it's not going to track you. The next button is for Smart Capture. And with this enabled, the app looks for human faces within the frame. And if it finds any, it's going to place a box around the face with this little green arrow. So then you just tap on the box to choose which face to track and it's going to start tracking. Alternatively, you can just tap the trigger once and the app will start tracking whichever face has the green arrow. If you want to switch to a different face, you can just tap on the box around their face. And you can do that before recording or even during recording. Because Active Track is now going to stick to whoever you tell it to track, and it's not going to switch between different faces. It's not going to get confused. It will tell the difference, hopefully, between the different faces. The last button is Dual Lens Boost, and this only shows up when you use the rear cameras of your phone. Enable this, and Active Track 8 uses both the main camera and the ultra wide. Then it does that to more accurately track at long distances. So to stop tracking, you just either tap the X in the corner of the tracking box, or you can tap the trigger once again. With Active Track 8.0, you can actually keep tracking the selected subject as you zoom in and out. So you can even switch between different cameras on your phone, and it's going to keep tracking. And you can keep tracking all the way up to maximum zoom, but I did find that the more you zoom in, the less effective the tracking becomes. Active Track 8 also allows you to track objects, as well as pets and other animals like ducks and geese sometimes, if that's your thing. Below the record button is a circle with a frame of the last media that you captured, and this is actually a button which allows you to access the media gallery. Tap and Mimo is going to automatically play the last clip that you shot, or just show you the photo if it's just a photo. And you can now actually favorite this clip or photo by tapping the heart button. If you tap the I button to open up information about the clip, you can see date, size, resolution, and if it's a video, you can see frame rate and duration. To close it, you just slide your finger down the screen, which I only discovered by messing around until it closed. Tap the trash button if you want to delete this media. To access the rest of your media, you just tap the button which is next to the trash can. And the gimbal actually automatically switches to portrait mode so that you can view the whole gallery. This makes it just a little bit easier. And if you tap on a horizontal clip, it's going to switch back so you can view that easier as well. In the corner, next to the front and rear camera switch button, is the filters button. And if you tap the filters button, you're going to open up an extensive set of color filters. And there's plenty to choose from here. Swipe to choose an overall style and then a specific filter. And then use this slider to adjust the intensity. And you can actually see the intensity number change inside the chosen filter. Actually, there's also a LUT button here. So if you tap that, you can import your own LUTs, or you can go to DJI's LUT Hub, which I haven't actually explored myself, but you can have a look there. The only thing I'd say about LUTs is that the Mimo app doesn't offer support for any log profiles, so I'm not really sure what you would use the LUT for. You should just stick with the filters, I'd say. When you're using a filter, back in the main screen, the filter button is now going to be yellow. So like in the native camera app of your device, the Mimo app has a yellow reticle, and that allows you to set and lock exposure and focus. Just tap the screen where you want the camera to set exposure and focus. Tap and hold until you see this yellow padlock, and that means that everything is locked now. So it's not going to change focus, it's not going to change exposure. And once it's locked, you can just slide your finger up and down here to change the exposure level. There aren't too many indicators on the Mimo app screen now. We've just got top left, you're going to see the battery level indicator for your smartphone. And all the other indicators for battery levels and stuff will be elsewhere, like on the gimbal, the front panel. Below the settings button is the glamour mode button. Switch this on if you want to beautify your subject with digital effects. And you can use these sliders to adjust things like how slim your face is, if you want smoother skin, make your eyes bigger and that kind of stuff. But you can't use this at 60 frames per second or with Active Track and 4K combined. However, you can use Active Track with Glamour Effects when it's switched to 1080p. So if you have an iPhone, the Mimo app lets you adjust exposure and white balance manually. Tap the 4 circles button and then tap exposure control. So you can adjust the exposure value by sliding your finger up and down. And if you do this, the exposure is still going to adjust automatically, but it's going to aim darker or lighter depending where you set it. Tap the M button and now you can actually set the exposure and the white balance completely manually. So we've got these two A buttons in yellow and these indicate that the app is still in auto mode. Tap the first one to switch exposure to manual and the second to switch white balance to manual. And then we can just swipe to set shutter, ISO and white balance. And when you're finished, just tap away and you're going to see a new button now in the left menu and there's an M to indicate that you're using manual mode. Tap that and then tap auto and it's going to return to auto exposure and white balance. And there's also a little reset button here that you can use just to reset everything. Below the glamour button is the frame rate and resolution button. So with my iPhone 17 Pro, I can go up to 4K and 60 frames per second here. You can choose 24 or 25 frames per second for film look style. 60 frames is good for slow motion if you play back at 30 or 24 frames per second. So just go into your editing program, slow the clip down by 50 or 40 if it's a 24 frames per second sequence. Note that the options here change depending on the camera mode. Tap the 4 circles button to open settings. But if you have an earlier model, you won't have the screencasting feature because that's part of the frame tap remote. Apart from that, you're going to see the teleprompter button. Tap that and you can place text over the screen, which scrolls as you talk. So then you've got this beginner tutorial button, which opens up some screens which show you the basic operation of the gimbal. So pretty useful if you're out in the field and you don't have access to internet maybe, you can just quickly tap this and remind yourself of what all the buttons do. Exposure control, we already covered. Flash basically just controls the flashlight of your phone and it just switches it on and off. Watermark allows you to toggle on or off the DJI watermark. If you switch it on, you can then choose the type and the placement of the DJI watermark. Screencasting is where you can set up sending your phone screen to the frame tab. And I've actually covered that in my OM8P full tutorial, so check that video out if you want to know how to make that work, and I will link it in the description, of course. And so there's actually more settings. And if we tap the more settings cog here, we're going to open up loads more. So when we do that, we've got 3 tabs: Gimbal, Active Track and General. So let's just go through them now. Under the Gimbal tab, we can change the gimbal mode. Just swipe here to change, but normally we're going to just use the buttons on the gimbal itself, rather than having to tap through here because it would be rather laborious to change gimbal mode, wouldn't it? But it just gives you the extra option if for some reason you can't do it on the gimbal. Tap Gimbal Calibration and then tap Start and it's going to automatically adjust the level of the phone in the gimbal. Calibration goes through a process and at the end the gimbal should be holding your phone camera perfectly horizontal, perfectly level with the horizon. Place the gimbal on its legs on a flat surface and then start the calibration, and in a few seconds your gimbal should now be set correctly. But if you're not quite happy with the result, you can tap this other button which is called Horizontal Gimbal Adjustment. And then you can just tap these plus and minus buttons and that will adjust the level of your phone manually and you can get it to exactly how you want it. Gimbal responsiveness is actually quite an important setting, and I think most people don't really know about this setting. So if you want nice, smooth, graceful shots where the gimbal kind of eases in and out of position, then switch to slow. For sport or action, switch to fast. And for everything else, just switch to medium. But now DJI has actually added a custom setting. So here you can use the slider and you can set the responsiveness to exactly as you want it for the shot. Zoom speed is pretty self-explanatory, I think. You can just adjust if you want the Mimo app to zoom slower or faster. There are 3 settings for the joystick. Rotational speed adjusts how fast the camera rolls when you use the spin shot mode. So you've got slow, medium or fast, and again you can set it to custom. So if joystick control is set to free, the joystick pans and tilts at the same time. So you can push diagonally for a diagonal move. But if you set it to horizontal stroke vertical, the joystick locks to one axis at a time. So that means that if you push diagonally, it's not going to go diagonal. It'll either go in a tilt movement or a pan movement. So this just prevents any wobbles if you want to shoot a perfectly straight tilt or pan shot. With the invert joystick direction setting, you can invert the direction that the gimbal moves when you push the joystick. So the settings you've got here are off, horizontal, vertical, or all. And if you want the gimbal to pan right when you push the joystick left, invert horizontal. And if you want it to tilt down when you push up, invert vertical. And all obviously inverts both. Quick Launch is a feature which automatically starts the Mimo app as soon as you mount an iPhone to the gimbal. So as far as I know, this feature does only work with iPhones, but I might not be right with that, but I might check. I better check. Now, if you set your iPhone correctly, the Mimo app sends a notification, which you can then tap to open the app. So it just goes straight there, and it's just a little bit easier, especially if you have a lot of apps to scroll through. In the Mimo app settings, select the General tab, scroll down, and then toggle on Quick Launch. And next, make sure your iPhone isn't in Do Not Disturb mode, because obviously that's going to prevent any notifications from any apps, including Mimo. Then open Settings for your iPhone, go to the DJI Mimo app and then tap that. Tap Notifications and allow notifications, and make sure that location and precise location are enabled for the app. And then after doing all that, when you place the phone onto the gimbal, you should get this notification, so you can just tap it and then off you go. Sound just toggles on or off the alert sounds of the gimbal. Gimbal indicator toggles on or off the various indicators, which tell you things like whether the gimbal is connected and what it's connected to and stuff like that. Extended tilt mode. This actually increases the gimbal's tilt range beyond the default, letting you tilt the camera further, up or down, than usual. So the downside is that the joystick becomes tilt only in this mode, so there's no roll or pan control when this is active. So it's quite a specialist mode rather than a general shooting one. So you just turn it on for a specific shot and then turn it off to get your full gimbal control back. And then finally at the bottom here you can factory reset all the gimbal's parameters. So active track settings, here you can adjust the following sensitivity. So if you tap this, you're going to open a slider, and then you can use this to adjust from slow to fast. So if you want the gimbal to immediately react to any movement, push this towards the fast end. And if you want a little delay or a slower follow movement, push towards the slow end. The downside of setting this to fast is that you might find that the camera is reacting to every little movement. That might not actually be pleasant to watch for your viewers, but you can just adjust it to get it reacting fast enough but not too jerkily. Subject location sets where the subject will be placed in the frame after you start tracking. So if you want it to always center the subject in the middle of the frame, select Camera View Center. But if you want the subject to be kept in the position that they were in when you started tracking, then select Current Location. If you want the tracking to tilt up and down when it's trying to keep you in the correct position, then toggle this one on. Otherwise, when the subject moves up and down, the gimbal won't react. The final setting here means it's going to automatically lock onto a face and start tracking as soon as you switch to the selfie camera. And so we go into the General tab here. At the top, we've got Device Connection, which allows you to switch Mimo to a different DJI device. Photo Specs allows you to change the aspect ratio of your photos, so you can get 4:3, 6:9, 18:9, and the square 1:1 ratio. In my iPhone, color mode switches between Rec 709 and Dolby Vision, but still no Apple log or ProRes. So we've got some other settings here. So Grid actually gives you two options for guides that will sit on your screen and are going to help you with your framing. So you've got the good old rule of thirds grid, or you can add the diagonal lines too, and that can help you with your targeting. So for example, you might use these diagonals for shooting a hyperlapse. Because if you want a certain object in the frame to remain in the same position, for example, this will give you a smoother, more impressive hyperlapse. Sleep is just basically how long before the screen of your phone times out. If selfie flip is on, that means that the image is switched when using the selfie camera. Because normally the selfie camera shows the reverse image. And that means that if you have text in shot, for example, it's going to look like it's in a mirror. So if you enable this last one, save original panoramic images, it means that you're going to get a copy of each individual photo as well as the stitched together Pano version. So that's it for this video. If you do want to learn more about smartphone filmmaking, join us over on Patreon. We just reached 5,000 members, so a big thank you to all those members who are supporting this channel, helping me to make these videos and to bring this sort of knowledge to you. Other than that, I'll see you in the next video that I see you in. Don't forget about the book.